It was the kind of night where the sky looked like it had torn itself open. Lightning laced the heavens, thunder cracked like a rifle at war, and the rain slammed down like God had turned the oceans upside down. In the middle of that chaos, somewhere on the edge of a small coastal town in Louisiana, a boy named Eli Granger sat curled up against a wall, his arms wrapped tightly around his little sister, Gracie, trying to stop the wind from ripping her away from him. He was 11. She was 5. Their parents were still inside the house when it collapsed. He'd never forget that sound. The groaning wood. The shattering glass. His mother's scream. His father's voice shouting for them to run. And then silence so loud it drowned out the storm itself. When the sun rose the next morning, there was no house left. Just splinters, soaked photographs, and broken memories. And Eli, standing barefoot in the wet mud, holding Gracie's hand, trying not to cry, because if he cried, she would cry. And someone had to stay strong. Someone had to be the adult now. The days after. Eli's world changed overnight. There were no grandparents left to call, no aunts or uncles rushing in. Just neighbors who offered blankets and casseroles and awkward sympathy. For a while, the Granger kids were bounced between emergency shelters and kind-hearted strangers, but no one stayed long enough to really care. Social services talked about splitting them up, placing Gracie with a foster family and Eli somewhere else. But Eli clung to her like a lifeline, refusing to let go. "I promised Mom," he lied. "I promised her I'd keep her safe." The caseworker looked at his bruised face, the way his arms never left Gracie's shoulders, and paused. After a long silence, she said quietly, "All right, Eli. But you'll have to grow up fast." He already had. The trial of living. The months that followed were a blur of hard lessons. Eli learned how to boil pasta without burning the pot. He learned that Gracie needed her blanket every night or she'd wake up screaming. He figured out how to wash her hair, get her to school on time, read her bedtime stories, and check her homework even though he struggled to read himself sometimes. He took odd jobs, sweeping floors at the gas station, stacking crates behind the grocery store, raking leaves. Mr. Connors at the hardware store started slipping him a few dollars under the table. "Don't tell nobody," the old man would say, pretending to grumble. "But you're a good kid, Eli." Eli never spent a cent on himself. Everything went to food, clothes for Gracie, and saving up for a tiny trailer home someone told him was for sale down the road. He still had nightmares. Of the storm. Of the house. Of the moment his father's voice vanished. But he never told Gracie. He never let her see his tears. Challenges that nearly broke him. There were days when the weight was too much. When Gracie got sick and they didn't have money for medicine. When Eli got jumped by older boys who knew he had cash in his pocket. When the trailer's roof started leaking, and the winter wind came in through the cracks. The worst came a year later. A school counselor noticed how tired Eli looked, how thin Gracie had become. Questions were asked. Files reopened. A court date set. The state wanted to remove them again. "You're still just a child, Eli," the lawyer said. "You can't raise another child." He wanted to scream. Instead, he stood up in court in a second-hand button-up shirt, gripping Gracie's hand and staring at the judge with all the fire of a boy who had seen too much too soon. "My mom used to say storms show you who you really are," he said quietly. "When the storm came, I didn't run. I didn't hide. I protected my sister. I found us a home. I fed her. I kept her in school. I didn't give up. I'm not asking you to believe I'm a man, just asking you to let me keep being her brother." The courtroom went silent. The judge looked at him for a long time before finally nodding. The turning point. After the ruling, things began to shift. A retired teacher named Miss Lillian heard about them and started stopping by. She brought books for Eli, tutoring sessions, and fresh cookies for Gracie. Slowly, others stepped in, not out of pity, but respect. The town began to see Eli not as a child broken by tragedy, but as something rare, a boy shaped by fire who refused to be consumed by it. By the time Eli turned 16, he had saved enough to buy the trailer outright. By 18, he had earned his GED, and was working full-time as an apprentice electrician. And by 19, he stood proudly in the crowd as Gracie graduated elementary school, the smile on her face as bright as any sunrise. When she ran to hug him, whispering, "We did it, Eli," he finally let himself cry. And at the end, the video ends with a present-day Eli, now a young man, sitting on the porch of that same trailer, the roof patched with his own hands. Gracie, now a teen, laughs in the background with a dog at her side. Eli looks into the camera. "I was just a boy," he says, voice steady. "But when the storm came, I became what I had to be. A man." And with that, he stands, waving as Gracie calls him inside for dinner. The screen fades out with a soft message. It's not the years that make a man, it's the storms he survives, and the love he protects.